Hey guys, John here. So the biggest question I always get when I do these courses is where can I get access to the source code? So I obviously can't upload that here on YouTube, so I've made that available for you over on BitTorrent. And along with the source code, you'll also be able to actually download the videos to your computer so you can have them forever. So if for some reason something crazy happened and I decided to delete them, or YouTube kicked me off of their site or whatever, it wouldn't really matter for you, because you would have all the source code, you'd have all the videos, everything essentially that I've created for the course you would have on your own computer. So I've created a link in the description where you can find that stuff over on BitTorrent. Please consider going over there, supporting me that way. I'd appreciate that. Also, please consider making a donation here on YouTube using the fan funding. This is how, or one of the ways that I'm able to keep all of the videos that I'm doing and releasing here on YouTube for free, by those who are able to pitching in and allowing me to do that. So please consider that. And if you need access to any of the resources that I use through everything that I do online, coding, releasing videos, etc., you can head on over to johnmorrisonline.com/resources, and I have a whole slew of all sorts of different resources, from hosting to different tutorials and just everything over there that I use. So again, johnmorrisonline.com/resources. All right, on to the lesson.
Hey there, John Morris here. I'm the lead instructor for the Wishlist Member Certified Developers Program and the CEO here at johnmorrisonline.com. In this video, we are going to talk about the first and ultimately most important individual skill that you need to learn when it comes to responsive web design, and that is working with media queries. And media queries are essentially what allows responsive web design to even happen. Assuming you're somewhat familiar with CSS, then you know with CSS that you are able to target certain elements, HTML elements, on a page and apply styles to them. And that's the whole idea behind CSS. And if we just take a quick look at an example here. So on our HTML page, we have a div with a class named span. And in our CSS file, here is how we reference that span, that class name span, and this is the style that we apply to it. So we're basically targeting this div and applying this style to it. Well, media queries are similar, except you're not targeting elements on your page. Ultimately you do, but with the actual media query itself, what you're doing is you are targeting different attributes of the device that is viewing your web page. And so in most cases, what you are targeting is the width of the screen that is viewing your device. So again, and the reason behind that is because, one, you need to, the width is what ultimately determines, how your page looks. That's what changes with different devices. The height really doesn't come into play because you can scroll essentially infinitely when it comes to height. What you're really targeting with responsive design is the width, and making your site so that someone doesn't have to scroll from left to right to see your entire web page. Okay, so we're mainly targeting width, and then of course we want the width of the screen that is viewing that particular page. Now, there are other things that you can target, and if we come back over here, a good article for you to look at is the developer guide on media queries from Mozilla, and I'll include a link, to this on the page where this video is, so that you can easily find this article. But this article gives you a good breakdown of what media queries are, some of the syntax, and some of the different things that you can target. So I'll just run through a couple things that are of, I think, importance here. One, you'll notice, and I'll actually come over here to show you this. When you're targeting the width, we're obviously targeting pixel width. You can target a min width, and you can also target a max width. And so the difference between the two is that this target says that the screen has to be at least 768 pixels wide. Okay, so if the screen is bigger than 768 pixels wide, then this style will get applied. If it's less than that, then it won't, and that goes on to infinity. So this could be 5 million pixels wide, and this this style will still get applied, unless of course you have something like this and this that override it at higher widths, but we'll get into that in a minute. So that's what min width is. Max width is essentially the opposite. It says that anything that's lower than this width or lower, essentially, then this style will apply. So anything that is 1199 pixels or lower, this style will get applied, again, unless of course you have other queries at lower widths that change that. And again, we're going to get into all the details of that. Okay, so when you're talking about width, you can target max width, you can target min width, you can target device width, which is a little bit different. You can couple different queries together and so forth. So again, this is a good article to look at in terms of a lot of that. I'm going to show you obviously what you need to know in order to build a responsive website. But if you want to get into, more advanced stuff and, just kind of see what's available out there, this is kind of a good place to start. So the first thing they come across is these logical operators. And so the main one that you're probably going to work with is the AND operator. So essentially what the AND operator does says that you can specify different device properties that you want to target, and means that in order for this query to return true and thus apply the style that you've set for it, both of these have to be true. So it has to be at media essentially equals media all. It's kind of shorthand for media all. And you might be wondering, well, what does that mean? Well, you can have media screen, you can have media TV, you can have media print, and so on and so forth. So you can actually apply different styles if you're on a screen, which is what we're viewing now, which is the majority of the cases. Or you can change that CSS if, for example, you have you're displaying a printer-friendly version of the page. When that gets displayed, you can target that and change the styling for that particular page for the print view, TV, and so on and so forth. So there's a number of different different kinds of contexts, I guess the word would be, that you can target in terms of the media. But again, at media with nothing after it, like TV or print or whatever, is basically all. So it's going to target all of them. Okay, and that's commonly what you're going to work with. So we're saying at media, and it has a min width of 700 pixels, and the orientation is landscape. Okay, so both of these have to be true. There has to be a minimum width of 700 pixels, and you have to be in the landscape view in order for whatever styles you apply to be added. Okay, so both have to be true in that case. That's different from comma separated lists, which if you do at media min width 700 pixels, handheld, and orientation landscape, then this comma is essentially the same thing as an or. So this is basically saying that it needs to be a min width of 700 pixels or be a handheld device that is in the orientation landscape. Okay, so you can see that as you work through that, you can get really specific about what you're targeting. Now, in most cases, you're going to, in order to, I would say, keep your CSS simplified, you're going to start off by targeting in general. So you may not get this specific with the majority of your CSS, but then as you've got all kind of your general CSS and responsive design built, if you want to go back and target certain things, you can again add that after the fact to target certain devices, certain orientations, and so forth, in order to give you really fine-grained control over what you're targeting. So again, this is a really good article to look at in terms of all of the different things that you can target and you can do with media queries. As you can see, there's a ton of things that are here. So a lot of this you really don't need to know in order to get to building a responsive website. So we're not going to plow through all of that. I'm going to show you what you need to know to build it, and then once you have that conceptual basis, a lot of this stuff is just it's easy to grasp. So again, this is a good article to look at. All right, so again, we'll come over to our code here, and so I want to show you essentially two things that are going on here. So one, what I'm changing here is, you'll notice I'm changing the background color of our span div to show you the differences of at the different resolutions and how they get applied. Okay, so that's what we're targeting, the background color. That's what's going to change. Obviously, as we've kind of already covered in some of the approach videos, you've seen that what you're actually going to be targeting is the width of the div, and in most cases, and floats and images and so forth. And again, we're going to go through all of that as we go through the course. But here, to show you how this kind of changes, I'm just targeting the background color. So our default would be the word background color is to make it black. Okay, and then I'm going to go ahead and just comment these out, and we're going to start off talking about the min width targeting. Okay, so if the screen has a minimum width of 768 pixels, we're going to change it to 111, a minimum width of 980, 222, a min width of 1200, 333. So the way this should work is that anything lower than 768 pixels will display black. Once it hits 768 pixels, then it should change to 111. Once it hits 980 pixels, it'll change to 222. And once it hits 1200 pixels, it'll change to 333. All right, so let's head over here and just take a look at that. All right, so let's shrink this down. And I'm showing the console here so that you can see what the actual color is. Obviously, you can tell that's black. But here, we're less than 768 pixels, so we're showing black. As we move this up and we hit our first 768 pixels, you can see that now it's changed to 111, so our style has been applied. As we move up, now we hit 222, and our 980 pixels and our 222 is applied, and then eventually we hit 1200 pixels and our 333 is applied. Okay, and anything bigger than that is going to show that 333. Right, so that's how the media queries get applied. Now, what's really important to note with this is the way that these need to be ordered. So again, you may or may not be aware, so I just want to make sure I cover it in case you're not. CSS stands for Cascading Style Sheet. Okay, so this is a style sheet, and the cascading part means that this cascades downward. So anything, as you move down, styles further down your style sheet override ones further up your style sheet. So the 768, this media query essentially overrides our default. This media query overrides this 768 one, and this one overrides all of the above. Okay, so when you're working with min widths, it's important that you put your smallest width. Well, we'll go back just a second. first off, when you're creating your style sheet, it's important that you put all of your standard default styling first. Okay, so you're going to put all that up here, and then you put all of your responsive styling down below. That's so that by default you're going to have your web page display how you want it to display. Okay, and then as you target different screen widths, you're going to override those defaults. So we're overriding the default background color in our media query here. All right, then when you're working with min widths, it's important that you start with the smallest width and go to the next one and to the next one. If I take this and I move this up here, you're going to see that this background of 333 will actually never get applied. So if I refresh this and we go all the way back down to the bottom, so far so good. We're under 768,000. Once we get to 768, it goes to 111. Once we go to 980, it's 222. But you'll notice that we get above 1200 and we never get to the 333. Okay, the reason that is because this 1200 gets overridden by these other two because the CSS cascades from top to bottom. So we hit this media query before we ever hit this one, and since this one is lower, it overrides this one. Okay, so again, with min widths, it's important that you start with the smallest and you work to the biggest from top to bottom. Okay, just like I have here. Right, so again, a lot there, maybe somewhat confusing. I would say play with it, but ultimately the bottom line is that when you're talking about min widths, you want to work from your smallest width to your biggest width in a top to bottom fashion, just like I have here. Right, so now if we look at max widths, you'll notice that it's the opposite. Okay, with max widths, you want to work from your biggest to your smallest. Okay, and that's because with a max width, you're essentially doing the opposite of what you're doing with a min width. So this query here is saying that anything essentially below 1199 pixels needs to be this color. Here it's anything below 978, and here anything below 767. Okay, so because you're working, you're saying anything below this width, if you want to change the styling for something that's a smaller screen resolution, that declaration has to come after this larger one up here in order to override it. Okay, so again, we'll go ahead and head over and we'll look at this and we'll refresh this page. And so again, just to cover, our first one is a max width of 1199 pixels. So anything less than 1199 pixels is going to be 444. If it's greater than 1199 pixels, it's going to go back to our default. Okay, so that's why we're here greater than 1199 pixels and our styling, the background is 000. As we shrink this, you'll see that we hit below 1200 pixels and this changes to 444. And then as we get to below 980, it changes to 555. And below 767, it changes to 666, just like we would expect. Okay? Again, if I come up here and I drag this to the top, then you'll see that if we refresh this, that this is going to mess up the way that basically everything works. So we start back at 000. As we go down, you see it stays at 000 all the way until we get to our 1199, and then we come down here 979, and when we get down here, our 767 doesn't get applied. And the reason our 767 doesn't get applied is because this targets our max width of 1199. So anything below 1199 is going to display this color. Well, this is lower, so it's overwriting this and this gets triggered before this ever does. Okay, so again, hopefully that makes sense to you. If not, again, just remember the rule of thumb that when you're dealing with min widths, you go from smallest to biggest, and when you're dealing with max widths, you go from biggest to smallest. Okay, now you might be wondering, well, there's a lot of frameworks and sites out there that use both min widths and max widths in their design. So do you put min widths first or max widths first? And that actually depends on what you're doing. Okay, so the thing you have to keep in mind is whatever lower is going to override what's higher. Okay, so whatever's down here is going to override this up here. So essentially, with this setup, all of this is going to override all of this. I haven't looked at it closely, so there may be some gaps in there where some of these styles get applied. But as a general rule, all of these styles are going to override all of these ones. All right, so if you need to use max widths in conjunction with min widths, you have to take a look at what it is that you're actually trying to do and decide if you want the min width declarations to override the max widths for a particular element. And it may be different on an element by element basis. In one particular instance, in one element that you're styling, you may want the max width styling to override the min width stuff, or in another one, you may want the min width stuff to override the max width stuff. It really just depends on what it is that you're doing. Okay, so again, just keep in mind that whatever's lower in the style sheet, whatever comes further down, is going to override what's further up. So you just got to look at that accordingly. All right, so that's the big thing to take a look at when it comes to media queries. Now, the last thing that I want to cover, just because sometimes you can see something and think that there's some sort of rule there, and that's not always the case. Here I'm targeting 768, 980, and 1200. I'm targeting down here 1199, 979, and 760. So these are all based around 768, 980, and 1200. Are those hard, fast rules? No, they're not. These numbers, these pixel widths, are arbitrary. What they are attempting to do is attempting to look at common screen sizes and account for those. Okay, so 768, an iPad is 1024 by 768, right? So this is essentially attempting to target iPad devices. So this is saying a min width of 768, so it needs to be at least 768. So that would be an iPad in the vertical position. So that's kind of what this styling is targeting. That's the idea that it's based around. So it's just looking at common device widths and targeting those. This 980 pixels is a standard fixed width kind of layout. So we're saying if we're at least 980 pixels, oftentimes what you're going to put in here is things that are targeting, your standard kind of default way you want the website to look. 1024 pixels is pretty standard. 1280 or 1200 are pretty standard targets. It's just a matter of you looking at your website that you're building, its needs, who's going to be visiting it, who you want to target. You could obviously add more media queries in here. So I'm targeting essentially 3 different widths here. You could target 5, you could target 10, you could target 100. If you really want to get that crazy, you could target any width that you want to target here. Okay, so it's arbitrary. That's my point, is there's no hard fast rule. It's more just an idea of looking at widths. It's less of a science and more of an art in terms of what you're targeting. Okay, so one thing that you can do that is helpful in terms of figuring out what to target is you can look at common frameworks like Bootstrap or Foundation or whatever, and just take a look at what they're targeting, because those frameworks are used very heavily. There's a lot of community support and development that goes into them, and so the things that they're targeting are probably pretty good things for you to target. Okay. So, and when we get into looking at some of the frameworks later and how to use them, we'll obviously take a look at that. Okay. So that is how to work with media queries in order to make your site responsive. Hopefully you enjoyed that, and I'll talk to you later.